You unlock this benefit with the key of Patreon. Beyond is another dimension. A dimension of thought. A dimension of speculation. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both waffle and substance. Of things and ideas. You've just crossed into the podcast zone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. We are back and it's going to get meta. We're into the episode A World of Difference, and I'm obviously always joined by Julian. So Julian, first and foremost, what were your thoughts on this episode?
I see the cameras. Yeah. I love this episode. I mean, it is just so gripping. Again, I identify with crazy characters. I really identify with this. I'm so prone to solipsism. I'm so prone to more than conspiracy theory. Like, I'm prone to simulation theory, and it is just so charming, especially in 1960, to have a man fully believe that, he is who he is, and then turn to the side and it's like, yeah, all of a sudden I could see through the Doctor Who perception filter and there's no wall there. There's a camera crew. I mean, it's wonderful. Well, did you enjoy it as much?
Oh, I did. I really liked this episode, and I've seen this done in other things. It made me think, but before I'd seen it, because it's the first time I've seen this one, there was a series in the 90s called Erie, Indiana, which is a great show. And that did exactly the same thing with their main character. They did something, though, that I was wishing this show would do. I almost thought, as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, they're going to do it. So in Erie, in Indiana, he's on the set of a TV show called Erie, Indiana. And you meet the actual director, and he gets to meet the actors as they are, as real people, and all this, like a version of that. They play like divas and stuff. I was really hoping that he would have been in an episode. No, he's not. He's in a film called, what's it called? The Personal Life of...
The Private World of Arthur Curtis.
That's it, yeah. I was so hoping that Rod Serling would be a part of this episode.
Oh.
Like it was going to go full meta.
The new Twilight Zone.
Right.
And it doesn't work. Right. There's this episode where they... I mean, this is all digression, but there's an episode where they notice there's this kind of grainy, ghost-like image in old classic Twilight Zone episodes in these frames.
Mm-hmm.
And, and this person is sort of in reality. And of course, I mean, spoiler alert, no surprise, it turns out to be a CGI Rod Serling.
Right.
Yeah, I mean... That would have worked. I'm not sure that they would go quite that meta.
No. But I did like this. I like this idea of, especially as it comes to later on, this suggestion of, because you're never entirely sure if this whole thing is a fabrication in his head. Like, you don't know if it's a mental break or whatever, but you learn that his life outside of this, of being this character, Arthur Curtis, is a bit crap. Like, he has a real vile ex-wife who he owes money to. He's clearly had a drinking and drug problem. He's about to lose the contract with the studio. So, has he sort of, delved into this character where he finds sort of solace, or is it real? Like, it's a really fascinating episode. This idea of sort of the reality that we choose to acknowledge. And the ending of this episode is so super creepy and wonderful that I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, and it's such a simple episode, and I think so much of Twilight Zone is this, where it's one idea. Not every episode, but most episodes are sort of like one idea, and then you watch the implications. You watch you watch this idea carry itself through in a pretty logical way, which is, a problem that this isn't done anymore in the same way. I love that, he tries to call himself and, it's like, no, there's that address, that phone number doesn't exist. He goes to the house and accost this little girl, you know. And this is a different universe from other episodes where, like, if that happened, it would just be like, oh, you know, it's just a thing that happened that illustrated the point. No, that little girl's mother is right there. The girl screams. It's not a cute, funny moment. And the mother is right there, and they've got to drive off before, you know,
Yeah.
this actor is accused of, you know, and the ex-wife even says, you know, before you're accused of assault. And I think, yeah, that's what really happens in real life when you're not in the movies and you grab strangers.
Yeah, and you know, like his ex-wife is vile. Like she's a real shrew. Like, but they play it up a bit much. But like, you know, there's almost like in her there's a frustration. Like her frustration, her anger and venom towards him tells a story in and of itself. Like she hates him, but you know, there was clearly a time that they were married and they were together. So the breakdown of that marriage and stuff, you know, so like, okay, there's been some real strife here. Like she's, you know, she doesn't seem like just a gold digger because it seems personal. So like, you know, to me, I was like, yeah, this tells of more of like, again, this guy, this actor must have been a real piece of work. Because you only get to know Arthur Curtis, you only get to know this. I was gonna say fictional character, but you get to know this character of Arthur Curtis and the panic he's going through, and the sort of like the existential crisis that he's going through. Like you say, when he calls home, when he calls his work, you know, and he's like, I work for this company, and the person on the phone's like, well, that doesn't exist. He's like, it does. I've worked there for 7 years. And so yeah, I you know, there's a lot going on here that I found really, really interesting. So, and it gets, like you say, like, you know, this idea of how do we accept the reality we are in? You know, if it's that bad, if it's that horrible, like, you know, there's a part of me that says, is it bad that he becomes Arthur Curtis? Like, if this was a mental break and he took on this identity, there's a part that goes, all right, it sounds like he's a better person as Arthur Curtis. Is it not a better thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, also like mental illness doesn't work that way, right? Like multiple personalities, you know, you don't flip a switch and think you're a fictional character. But I mean, and I found myself much like the bus depot episode, identifying with him, with sort of like, no, I remember this, but you know, others are like, no, that is not a thing that exists. You know, it's a sort of like Berenstein Bears thing, right? Where it's like, you know, no, I clearly remember this, and I've had many things like that, you know, including when I was a child, when I would just insist something was different, and it really creeped me out. And I was absolutely adamant. So I identify with that, and I think that you know, there is a way in which like this is just delightfully meta, but there's also a way in which you can see this. You were talking about Arthur Curtis versus Reagan, the actor,
yes.
Not Ronald, Gerald.
No. Yeah.
And how, you know, it is just this delightfully meta sort of play, but there is also this sort of like commentary on art. And if you want to push this, right, it's like, you know, yeah, here's Rod Serling, you know, of course, this was written by Richard Matheson. But, you know, this is the artist saying, yeah, in real life, it's fucking miserable. You know, I've got an ex-wife, you know, like celebrity isn't all you think it is. You know, people aren't perfect. You get tired of people, and, you know, agents aren't great. And, but the fictions we make on screen are so beautiful. And on screen, you know, it's like happily ever after, right? He loves his loving wife, Marion, you know, every relationship, you know, nobody argues over who's going to mop the floor in a movie, right? That's just not a thing that happens.
No, and that's the point. I think that's it. It's this thing of like, you know, he has this when you go in, you know, he's got a secretary, he's off on holiday, you know, they're arranging the tickets and all this other stuff. It seems cool. He's got a loving wife and a daughter. it's this sort of idyllic look. I mean, you know, I won't be honest. Like the film sounds this the personal life of Arthur Curtis sounds like a really dull film. Like, you know, to be perfect, but you know, it's a much more sort of like, you know, comfortable reality to be in for this person. And you know, I can understand it. It comes to the end. I like this idea. You know, you said about the bus stop episode, and this idea of dimensions bleeding into each other. Like, you know, I love this idea again of like dimensions. You know, this idea of if there are ultimate dimensions, yeah, something we have written as a fiction could be a reality somewhere else, especially if it's as mundane as the personal life of I was going to say Richard Curtis then, of Arthur Curtis. And yeah, it makes me think
that's the Flash thing, right? It's like, you know,
Yeah.
Flash has on Earth 2, they have comics of Flash on Earth 1, or vice versa.
Yeah, Grant Morrison's played with this, you know, a number of times. Multiversity, you know, probably being the most explicit. But
Animal Man, I can
Animal
see.
Man, yeah, I love that episode. And then obviously
the cameras.
Yeah, and he actually talks to Grant Morrison. So, you know, there's even a film called not adaptation. There's a film with Will Ferrell where someone starts narrating his life, and he finds out there's a woman writing a book about his life, and you know, and it's like I like these ideas of these things bleeding together, and but the ending of this episode, the desperation.
Yeah, talk about you are affected by the ending.
The ending of this episode is really good. So he gives in, like he goes back to the set, and they're taking the set away.
Yeah.
They're about to deconstruct it, and he basically sits, and you see that like the photos have gone, and then the lighting changes. It's a really nice edit the way it's done. The lighting changes, and all of a sudden the photos are back in their frames, and the wall is back. It's no longer a set; it's a full wall. And his wife turns up, and there's obviously a lovely moment of reconciliation. You know, like, oh my god, it's almost like I haven't seen you, you know, whatever. She says, "Well, you've disappeared all day. Where have you been?" To acknowledge that he's not been there. But the great part is that you've seen some people, like, you know, prop masters, whatever, taking a sofa off the set, and the sofa is missing from his office. Yeah. So it's affected in both worlds. And he's like, yeah, let's get out of it. Let's just go. Come on, I want to go. This is too weird. I've had a really, like, I want to just go on holiday now. I've got to get away. And as he is going out the building, like he's still slightly tuned into this other dimension, and he hears the people in the studio talking. And only he can hear them, and he's like, "No, let's go." And I love that, just that moment of like, you know, he's like, "No, like, you know, I don't want to be haunted by this, but like, let's go." Like, you know, this is like a life-defining moment. Like, I love the fact that he's like, you know, where have you been? And even his secretary is like, "I don't care. Here's your tickets. Go."
Yeah.
But I just really like the ending.
That's great. I mean, I love that you point out that, you know, you have that audio of sort of like the prop guys. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it seems to me as if he's like, you know, because that sofa's missing, it's not really clear exactly how all of this works.
No.
You know, and you know, these days I would expect a little more of that. But it seems to me that as he's fleeing like the destruction of his reality. Right? Like that office is not going to exist in a matter of minutes. So he knows, nobody else knows, but I guess if we believe that, he leaves his secretary to die, you know, or be unmade, right? To be more precise. And then we see an airplane taking off, you know, hinting that he has, you know, in fact escaped. And so, because I don't know how this works, that seems like it's this triumphant, like he's escaped into fiction. It's kind of like the end of the 16 millimeter Shrine episode earlier on, which I quite enjoyed, and I like this ending too. But I don't know if it's a good thing or not, and I don't know if like that airplane's going to go bye-bye, right? Like that airplane doesn't exist. Where is that relative to this set? Has he just escaped into this other universe somewhere else? Or is
it depends how you take it,
and everything's destroyed in his universe?
Well, it depends how you take it. Are these two distinct, separate universes that just at this point touched?
Yeah.
All right? Did they just touch his point? Because he exists, like the world exists. Like his thing is his wife, she was. They throw the script in the bin, so the production is off. But you never, if it's the personal life, like you don't meet the actress that plays his secretary, you don't meet the actress that's going to play his wife. Like he is the only actor, to appear from this movie. Like they don't introduce him to anyone else. So there's not this moment of going like, oh, this is Barbara, she plays your secretary, and this is your wife. This is June, and she plays your wife or your secretary, whatever. How they want to do it. That's never done. So for me, I always see them as two distinct realities that just merged at this point, and it's sort of like this sort of like cosmic interdimensional fuck up where he just happens to bleed across. Now, is that because of fiction? I don't know. So I do see it as a triumph because what I would say is this, for me, the differentiator is the outside world. So the set is important. The set is the nexus of this event. And so when he leaves the set, he goes out into the real world. We see him, his house as the actor. Was it Reagan? We see him on the street looking for his house as Curtis. We see all this in the real. We see him driving around the studio. The point is, the moment he steps out, for me, the moment he steps out, he goes back into the set. He goes back into his world. The sofa's gone, and that's a bleed. Let's call it a fiction bleed. The moment he and his wife step out into what there is their reality, into their real world, out of that building, it's no longer a set. It separates that world, and he's back into it. So him taking off in that plane is that distinction of like, no, he's back in a reality. Is in his reality. That's how I took it, anyway.
I think that makes the most sense. I think that's what the show wants, right? I don't think you're supposed to look at that plane and say, haha, this is a microverse that's, is a side effect of that set and is going to disappear. So I think you're right. I think, to the extent that an ambiguous question can have a more right answer, right?
Yeah. Stephen King tried to address this in a way. If you've ever seen or read The Langoliers, this idea of these things literally eating reality. And I'm not recommending that film because it's god awful.
Yeah.
But I love this concept of like, actually this reality is out of sync, or it's out of whack, and it's got to be destroyed. And so we're going to release these things, the Langoliers, to destroy it. And that's what, he could walk out, like you say, he could be walking out of that and go, actually, this fiction universe shouldn't exist. Off it goes. But if you ask Grant Morrison, all fictional realities exist, and we are just sort of siphoning them through to use as our fiction.
I'm going to confess something. I shouldn't say I absolutely believe, but I often see signs that this is a fictive reality. There are clearly, there are people's names who you just think like that is too on the nose. If like the one thing you're going to be known for is X and your last name is, X related, this is just, come on, this is a little too on the nose. And that happens over and over again. I mean, it's one of the things that makes me a little superstitious. Like, I've got a friend named Eva, and I'm like, I'm not eating any apple that you give me. I'm no figs, no pomegranates, just to be safe, so I do have a certain superstitious thing about names, but I do see, like, it seems as if these fictive cycles do affect our reality, and look, right around to 2015, the head writers of this narrative changed. And some people came on who were like, we need a new season. Let's go darker. Let's bring that nationalism back. So, there are just times where there are coincidences, and there are things that make me think, I'm very sensitive to this idea. Now, I acknowledge who the hell knows, but I do love this kind of play, and I won't tell you, whether I came from a more fictive reality than this or the metaverse back into this, but I don't belong here.
It's true. Well, it goes back to this idea of the, like you say, the Matrix and the fictional world that we all live in. We could all be computer sprites inside a computer that they say that's being you know, it's fictional universes all the way down, as they say.
Quite possibly.
Mm.
So it's a good episode, but you know, and it can be it's rockin' fun.
Yeah.
We can look too deep. We can look deeper, but you know, it's rockin' fun.
It is. It's a good episode. It's well worth checking out. Right. Any final thoughts? Is that are we good?
I don't belong here
on this podcast or in this world universe?
in this world.
We should
I look up at the ceiling sometimes and try to see the right angle relative to what I can see that my eyes can't perceive, and it hasn't worked so far, but I'm going to keep trying.
One day you're just not going to turn up and there'll just be a note on my screen. Right, anyway, we shall finish there. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And as always, it's been a treat. So we shall see you on the next episode.